Today we're going to talk about the single best week of Biden's presidency, and I interview Secretary of Transportation Pete Buttigieg about his response to Republicans voting against veteran health care. He debunks Republican lies about the new Inflation Reduction Act raising taxes, and he says whether it's difficult for him to get booked on Fox News. I'm Brian Tyler Cohen, and you're watching No Lie. So I usually take a deep dive into one topic each week, but I'm going to switch things up this week because Biden just had the single best week of his presidency. So instead of focusing on one thing, which seems counterintuitive, I'm going to tell you about all of them because, dear God, we have to celebrate the wins when we get them. First off, Republicans were basically falling over themselves waiting for a jobs report that was expected to show signs of a slowing economy. It was predicted that about 250,000 jobs would be added, which would be a major decline from the roughly 500,000 jobs that have been added each month since Biden took office. That didn't happen. The U.S. economy added a pretty staggering 528,000 jobs, and the unemployment rate fell to a 50-year low at 3.5%, which is great for Americans and bad for Republican officials who very desperately needed some proof points that we're in a recession. And record low unemployment doesn't really do them any favors on that front. Another economic indicator, gas prices have continued their race downward. Prices hit a more than 50-day low with the median U.S. gas price now below $4 a gallon. This is the second largest 60-day decline on record at just shy of $1 per gallon. On the legislative front now, which for months had seemed completely DOA, including with me. You know, I remember being here and talking about the bipartisan infrastructure package being the only legislative accomplishment that Biden would pass. Democrats reached a huge deal on a reconciliation package. Senate Democrats just passed the Inflation Reduction Act with the support of both Joe Manchin and Kyrsten Sinema, and once it's finally signed into law, will be the biggest investment in clean energy in U.S. history. It'll allow the government to negotiate lower drug prices. It'll reduce the deficit. It'll increase IRS funding to ramp up enforcement on wealthy tax cheats, and it'll impose a 15% corporate minimum tax on billion-dollar corporations that currently pay nothing in taxes. Every provision of this thing is hugely popular, and it'll be the biggest legislative achievement of Biden's presidency so far. Beyond that, the PACT Act passed the Senate, which allocated funding to veterans suffering from toxic burn pit exposure. That vote was held up when a bunch of Republicans decided to retaliate against Democrats for announcing the Inflation Reduction Act by blocking a bill for sick veterans. That backfired. They got absolutely skewered from every angle and ultimately voted for the exact same bill that they voted against when it came back up for a vote. Just some unsolicited advice here. If you're going to try to retaliate against Democrats by blindly blocking legislation, maybe make sure that legislation isn't allocating funding for American veterans currently dying of cancer and other illnesses that they sustained while overseas fighting in wars for this country. That one's free. The CHIPS Act also passed, which would fund the domestic semiconductor chip industry and make the U.S. more competitive with China. All of those delays that you're experiencing right now, from computers to cars and everything in between, those items all require chips that have to come from overseas. Making them here in the U.S. will mean not only jobs here, but shorter waits and an easing of inflation. On the international front, the leader of al-Qaeda, al-Zawahiri, was ordered killed by Biden. This was the guy responsible for planning 9/11 along with Osama bin Laden. His death was universally applauded across the political spectrum. And finally, voters in Kansas, of all places, showed up to vote down an effort to strip the right to an abortion from the state constitution there. That vote was 59-41, which is a huge signal to Democrats to focus on an issue that Republicans have miscalculated to a massive degree on. If there was any doubt that this will be the issue that defines the midterms, that should be put to rest. And already a bunch of pollsters have moved predictions for congressional races to the left based on the trends that we're seeing right now. Turns out that predicating your entire agenda on stripping Americans of their bodily autonomy while pandering to far-right Christian nationalists might not be a great midterm strategy after all. In other words, huge jobs numbers, record low unemployment, gas prices dropping, climate legislation, chip production, veterans health care, the leader of al-Qaeda killed, and voters siding with Democrats in even the reddest of states. But what makes these things even more potent is when you juxtapose them with the Republican agenda. Where Republicans have power right now, they have banned abortion, they're trying to ban contraception and interstate travel, they're trying to punish doctors, they're prohibiting the acknowledgement of the existence of LGBT Americans, they're banning books, they cut billionaires' taxes. These things aren't theoretical, they are happening right now where Republicans have control. So if that's what you're looking for, the Republican Party's for you. But if you're looking for jobs growth, for veteran care, manufacturing jobs coming home, climate protections, and reproductive right protections as well, then I'd make sure that I have a plan to vote in November. The choice here couldn't be more obvious. This week was a really, really good start, but there is still a lot more work to do. To watch my interview with Pete Buttigieg about his response to Republicans voting against veteran health care, where he debunks Republican lies about the new Inflation Reduction Act raising taxes, and he says whether it's difficult for him to get booked on Fox News, click the link right here on this screen or check out the interviews playlist on my YouTube channel.